we had to relocate because my phone died. But continuing with the Detroit riots and having segregated neighborhoods, how did that affect you as a kid or in your schools?
Going to private school, Catholic school for 10 years, in my education, everything was white, all white. And even though we were on the block was Detroit, there was no black kids even in the neighborhood, let alone in the school. So we really didn't um, have any black children in either school. Then when I went to public school, uh, it was the same way. It was segregated. And I remember my mom talking about it at the time when they were talking about busing kids in from Detroit into our neighborhoods, and my mom and dad, were not in favor of that because they thought that that would take away trying to teach children from the inner city um, things that like we already knew. Now, how would they be able to spend as much time with the students that were already there and that have already, basically paid their money and their tuition and everything? And then they would bring these kids in and they wouldn't be paying tuition, and then they would take away from our education. It wasn't necessarily that they were against the black kids getting an education. Everyone needs an education, but they just felt that it wasn't going to be fair to bring the kids in on buses and then the teachers having to spend more time, and because right after the Detroit race riots, everyone was very nervous about um, black families. Would they be a good family? A family that's not violent, or would they be like the Malcolm X kind of black folks that had violence at all costs, and if they didn't agree with you, then they would get rid of you. So there was a lot of fear in our neighborhood back then. So they were against the segregation. So we didn't really have to deal with, or didn't have the situation of having biracial classes. So
Yeah. And then while you were at school, did they prepare you for if there was a nuclear explosion or any sort of weapon?
yeah, that was more when I was in younger, in grade school. We, I don't know how often, but often enough that I remember them. We would have drills, radar drills, and we would have to hide under our desks and put our hands over our heads because the threat of a nuclear attack, they thought was important enough for us to practice that particular drill. Um, it seemed at the time they called it a Cold War with Russia, and meaning that we weren't actively like sending soldiers and they weren't killing one another. We're, we didn't have a battle on a battlefield, but both the United States and Russia had the ability to send rockets over the ocean and, potentially blow up cities. So that's what they were worried about, and they were worried about the Detroit area since it's so close to Canada. They thought they might bring some bombs into Canada, get them in that way, and then be able to destroy all the ports, all the port cities where you get supplies that would go across the nation. So they thought if they wanted to cripple the American economy and stuff like that, they would hit the port cities like Los Angeles and New York and Detroit and Atlanta. So there was always a little bit of fear there. They kind of put a fear into you about anyone being Russian, so I'm glad that I didn't go to school with any Russian kids because they would have been very probably picked on at the time because they really said that all Russians were bad back then, which everyone knows. Not everything isn't a word that you use when you talk about people. People are so different.
Yeah, totally. And during that time, there was marches and sit-ins going on. Do you know anyone who participated, or did you participate in any of those?
They were very relevant back in the day. I did not participate in those. but you definitely heard about them at the colleges mostly, because that's where the kids were getting older, and it was affecting them more about either having to go and fight, um, go fight in the war, or it just would affect them more. They couldn't get a job because they would have to be involved in things like that with the war. But yeah, no, for myself, I was not involved. I only remember one situation with my mom, who was a very forward-thinking lady of her time. And when the women's liberation movement with Gloria Steinem was around and was coming into being, my mom always felt that women should be paid for the exact same job. Why aren't they getting paid as much as a man? And my dad would say, well, it's because the man's taking care of the family. And my mom says, they're doing the same job. They should get the same money. So it was a long-standing argument in our house and in the family, when the families got together, of my mom would always bring it up. And I remember when there was a sit-in in Detroit, and they were burning bras to support the women's liberation. And my mom was so excited, she wanted to go down and burn her bra. I don't think she did, but she said, I hate these things. I want to burn my bra. So that's as close as I got to going to a march or hearing about them. But
All right, thank you.
mm-hmm.